Yeah, so we'll continue from here. We'll watch this and then I will discuss the spread and the other last two remaining part of the chapter. Okay, let me know if the video is audible.
The National Institute for Communicable Diseases, the NICD, is the National Public Health Institute for
Audible, right? Audible, clear. Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
okay.
South Africa. It provides reference microbiology, virology, epidemiology, surveillance and public health research to support the government's response to communicable diseases, or most commonly known as infectious diseases, are diseases that can be spread from one person to another and can cause a large number of people to get sick. They are caused by germs like bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites, or toxins. But how are communicable diseases spread? There are two ways communicable diseases can be spread: through direct contact or indirect contact. Direct contact transmission occurs when there is physical contact between an infected person and a susceptible person. Indirect contact transmission occurs when there is no direct human-to-human contact. Infectious diseases are often spread through direct contact. The types of direct contact include the following: person-to-person contact. Infectious diseases are commonly transmitted through person-to-person contact. Transmission occurs when an infected person touches or exchanges body fluids with someone else. This can happen before an infected person is aware of the illness. Sexually transmitted diseases and HIV can be transmitted this way: mother to unborn child. A pregnant woman may pass germs that cause infectious diseases to her unborn baby. Some germs can pass through the placenta. Germs in the vagina can be transmitted to the baby during birth. Droplet spread. The spray of droplets during coughing and sneezing can spread an infectious disease. You can even infect another person through droplets created when you speak. Since droplets fall to the ground within a few feet, this type of transmission requires close proximity. Infectious diseases can also be spread indirectly through the air and other mechanisms. For example, airborne transmission. Some infectious agents can travel long distances and remain suspended in the air for an extended period of time. You can catch some diseases simply by breathing. These are called airborne diseases. You can catch a disease like measles by entering a room after someone with measles has departed. Other diseases that spread through the air are common cold, TB, chicken pox, and mumps. Contaminated objects. Some organisms can live on objects for a short time. If you touch an object, such as a doorknob, soon after an infected person, you might be exposed to infection. Transmission occurs when you touch your mouth, nose, or eyes before thoroughly washing your hands. Germs can also be spread through contaminated blood products and medical supplies. Food and drinking water. Infectious diseases can be transmitted via contaminated food and water. E. coli is often transmitted through improperly handled produce or uncooked meat. Animal-to-person contact. Some infectious diseases can be transmitted from an animal to a person. This can happen when an infected animal bites or scratches you, or when you handle cat waste. Some zoonotic infectious agents are transmitted by insects, especially those that suck blood. These include mosquitoes, fleas, and ticks. The insects become infected when they feed on infected hosts such as birds, animals, and humans. The disease is then transmitted when the insect bites a new host. Malaria, West Nile virus, and tick bite fever are all spread this way. This was an overview of.
Right? Okay. So this is how, in general, or the overview of how infectious diseases spread. Right? So all of this is given in a very condensed form in the textbook also. They are actually touched upon all the examples which were there in the video itself. Right? Which is why I use that video. Though it is a little old and it's very technical, but yeah, you all this is also covered in the textbook itself, right? So the main ways infectious diseases are spread, or they travel around, are these, right? Air, food, water, contact, and body fluids. Right? This also we discussed yesterday. Here there are some examples which are given, right? And now we come to a little bit detailed version, which is how, or how exactly does it spread through air, or how does it spread through water, or how does it spread through vectors, right? And then one example of HIV, right? Yeah, this is the diagram, or how, what should I say, a flowchart kind of thing, which is there in the textbook for easy understanding, right? So infected person, there is indirect contact, which means you've touched something which that person has either worn, or utensils or clothes of that person, and yeah, there is a chance you might get infected. Then by air would be by if you sneeze, if you cough, or if you breathe in the droplets of that person, right? Uh, Main cause of common cold, right? Common cold is spread mostly like this, right? And now even COVID, which is why you are asked to wear a mask, right? All those things. Yes. So what I'll do is, in the further slides also, whenever there is an example which needs to be taken, because I need to explain what is the immune system, etc., and all, I'll be taking the example of coronavirus or COVID itself, since it is yeah, it is ongoing also, and it will be easier for you to relate, because you might have seen the restrictions, you might be seeing the preventive measures, or social distancing rules, whichever keep popping up, right, everywhere, maybe on the news, maybe internet, wherever. So you'll be able to understand all this easily. Okay, so I'll be referring to COVID all the time now from this slide onwards. Okay. Yeah, then by water, how is it transmitted is when waste or excreta gets mixed with the water supply. This was the main reason for the cholera outbreak which had happened in the 1990s or before that. I'm not sure of the exact year, right? Yeah, this was the main reason why cholera spread, which is why people then started realizing the importance of having a safe water supply or a clean water supply, right? Okay. Then what are vectors? Vectors is there in the next slide. I've written that here so that when you're reading, you don't feel that you've skipped out something. Okay? Yeah, and sexual contact. Right? Yeah. This example I've included is because what they showed in the video also, that HIV is, or AIDS is one such disease which can pass from the infected mother to the baby or the fetus also, right? So we see both kinds of interactions. What are interactions, as in I'm saying, is either there are some diseases or some cases where the mother can pass it to the unborn baby, or there are some cases like they are seeing in COVID right now. Okay, so what the trends or the study what they have observed is that whenever these mothers have taken vaccination, right? So their unborn child or the child who's born after the mother was vaccinated automatically had COVID antibodies in itself. Okay, so there are cases of positive interactions as well, and in case of HIV, it is negative where the disease or the virus travels from the mother to the baby. Right? It can either travel during the pregnancy via placenta or after once it is born. Okay, via breastfeeding. Yeah. Okay. And this is another figure which is there in the textbook, which I thought I should just explain. Yeah, again, to explain this figure, the best example which I can think of would be COVID, right? Because of this reason, we are practicing social distancing. We are asked to wear masks, right? We are asked to not gather in crowds or not form crowds anywhere, right? Because of this, right? So this easy to explain this figure using COVID as an example, right? What they say is the more crowded our living conditions are, the more likely it is that such airborne diseases will spread. So basically, if you are in a very congested place, okay, if there are like let's say so many people in this small room, okay, then the chance even if one person sneezes, right, the chance of all the other people picking up those microbes is very high, right? Whereas if in the same small room there are only like let's say three people, right? So that many people won't get infected. Of course, these two will also pick up the droplets because they are in a very small space, but the number of people getting infected or the possibility of getting infected will come down, right? Which is why they say you should be living in a well ventilated area, right? You should not be living in overcrowded conditions because of all these reasons, right? This diagram basically shows what happens when you sneeze or how droplets move in the air, right? So suppose you sneeze, then the small droplets evaporate in this zone and they are carried in air for minutes to or hours, right? Whereas the large droplets might settle to the grounds in a few seconds. So now what can happen is if you've come in contact with this ground, if you're barefoot, something like that, or you've touched this space, then the chance of you picking those droplets or those microbes up is high. Same way if you're standing directly opposite this person and that person sneezed, right? Even if they've covered their hand and sneezed, the droplets escape. It's not like you can see them, right? Which is why it's so much troublesome because we can't see it. Okay, so this is how it is carried in air and this is how it keeps moving. This is how the airborne diseases travel faster. And this is the exact reason why we've asked to wear masks because of COVID. So what happens is when you wear mask, when you are standing here and you've worn a mask, okay, forgive my drawing, right? And suppose your friend is standing here, okay, 6 feet away, and your friend has also worn a mask. Now, what happens is if even if you sneeze, okay, even if either one of you sneeze, let's say you sneezed, for example, your friend is standing far away, so is not in direct contact with the large droplets which fell to the ground, right? And also because you're wearing a mask, the amount of droplets which have escaped will be very less compared to when you're just standing like this very close to each other, right? Okay. So the droplets will be less. And since your friend has also worn the mask, the chances of your friend inhaling that droplet or those microbes is also very less. Right? So this is how the chance of infection or the spread of infection is reduced. Which is why you've been asked to wear masks, even if you're vaccinated, right? Even if, yeah, right now you might not be vaccinated, but yeah, for adults, even though they are vaccinated, they are asked to wear masks because of this reason, right? So you keep preventing the spread of disease by taking appropriate measures. Because airborne is very dangerous just because you can't see, so you have no idea where all it is traveling, right? Okay. So yeah, this is what the figure means, I just thought I'll explain it. Yesterday we spoke about this a little bit, right? What is a vector, right? This is that a cartoon vector from Despicable Me. Yeah, he is the bad guy, so I just added it here so that when you read this, you realize that vectors are also the bad guys who carry all these microbes, transfer them from one place to another. Right? One more video I would like to show you here. Yeah, this one is on the mosquitoes.
Now launching Baiju tuitions for your child in all concepts and solve challenging questions. Your child can take option where they can choose a batch that follows.
Oh, okay.
What's the worst bug on the planet? You might vote for the horsefly or perhaps the wasp, but for many people, the worst offender is by far the mosquito. The buzzing, the biting, the itching. The mosquito is one of the most commonly detested pests in the world. In Alaska, swarms of mosquitoes can get so thick that they actually asphyxiate caribou, and mosquito-borne diseases kill millions of people every year. The scourge that is the mosquito isn't new. Mosquitoes have been around for over 100 million years, and over that time have co-evolved with all sorts of species, including our own. There are actually thousands of species of mosquitoes in the world, but they all share one insidious quality. They suck blood, and they're really, really good at sucking blood. Here's how they do it. After landing, the mosquito will slather some saliva onto the victim's skin, which works like an antiseptic, numbing the spot so we don't notice their attack. This is what causes the itchy red bumps, by the way. Then the bug will use its serrated mandibles to carve a little hole in your skin, allowing it to probe around with its proboscis, searching for a blood vessel. When it hits one, the lucky parasite can suck 2 to 3 times its weight in blood. Turns out we don't really like that too much. In fact, humans hate mosquitoes so much that we spend billions of dollars worldwide to keep them away from us. From citronella candles to bug sprays to heavy-duty agricultural pesticides. But it's not just that mosquitoes are annoying. They're also deadly. Mosquitoes can transmit everything from malaria to yellow fever to West Nile virus to dengue. Over 1 million people worldwide die every year from mosquito-borne diseases. And that's just people. Horses, dogs, cats, they can all get diseases from mosquitoes too. So if these bugs are so dastardly, why don't we just get rid of them? We are humans after all, and we're pretty good at getting rid of species. Well, it's not quite so simple. Getting rid of the mosquito removes a food source for lots of organisms like frogs and fish and birds. Without them, plants would lose a pollinator. But some scientists say that mosquitoes aren't actually all that important. If we got rid of them, they argue, another species would simply take their place, and we'd probably have far fewer deaths from malaria. The problem is that nobody knows what would happen if we killed off all the mosquitoes. Something better might take their spot, or perhaps something even worse. The question is, are we willing to take that risk?
Right? Yeah. The buzzing of the mosquito itself was so annoying. Yeah. So that was on mosquitoes. In fact, actually, if any of you is interested, uh, Google and other team of scientists, I'm not sure which is the other team, they're actually working on eliminating mosquitoes. Right? So what they're doing is there is this, I can explain it to you in short. Okay, there is this one kind of uh, uh, what should I say? A parasite like bug like parasite. Okay, it's also called Wuchereria. Okay, let's just call it WB. Okay, this organism, it has this unique ability that whenever it has this gene, not unique ability, it has this gene for something called cytoplasmic incompatibility, which means basically whenever it will divide or whenever it will reproduce, it produces uh, only females. All the males are killed, right? So if there is no males which are being produced, which means your cycle will be stopped at this generation itself. There will be no more uh, there will be no more generations, right? So you'll stop here. So what these people at Google and other places, the scientists who are doing this research, in fact, they just, I think last year only they rolled it out finally. So what they did is they took this organism and they are taking this gene from it, right? So there is this whole study. Like if you take a biotechnology later, you will be studying all this only how you can take genes out of some organisms and you can put them in other organisms either to produce medicine or to uh, enhance anything. You can do it for plants, animals, people, anything. So whatever reason you want, you can take genes out of other organisms and put it in some other organism, right? Of course it's not as simple as it sounds, but yeah, you can do it. So what they did is they took this gene and they started putting it in mosquitoes so that when the mosquitoes breed, there will be only females and males will get eliminated, and hence their population will reduce. Now the question is, how will they inject or how will they put this gene into every single mosquito? It's not possible, right? You can't sit and pick one mosquito and keep putting this gene, right? So what they did is they caught a handful of mosquitoes, they injected this gene in them, and then via helicopter or they went to Africa, because Africa is a place where malaria and these mosquitoes are very deadly right now. So they via helicopter they've airdropped these mosquitoes there, hoping to see what happens now. Right, this is very recently done, so you can look it up if you're interested. Right, so actually people are still working on eliminating mosquitoes. Another interesting development which has just happened, we have coronavirus to thank for that, is that finally they have come out with anti-malarial vaccines. Okay, anti-malarial vaccines. This they were not able to produce anti-malarial vaccines for a very long time. But because people worked so hard in trying to understand COVID, they also started working on malaria and other things, right? And finally, they have rolled out a anti-malarial vaccine. And in India, the Serum Institute of India is currently working on it. But I think in US, they have already rolled it out, right? So this is another very big development which has happened this year itself, right? Okay. Just this is just GK I'm giving you in case you're interested. You can look it up or see what all keeps happening, right? Okay. So coming back to mosquitoes, why are they deadly? Is because uh, they are the vectors for a lot of microbes. Oh, what's wrong with this? Okay. Yeah, they are the vectors for a lot of microbes, right? Mostly protozoans. Okay. Yeah. And as you all know, probably would be knowing that the female mosquito only the female mosquito is the one which comes and bites you, or which needs blood for nourishment. The male mosquitoes don't really do anything, so they are harmless. Okay, yeah. And why do the female needs blood? Is because they need to be able to lay the eggs and continue the generation or continue reproduction, right? Yeah. So because of that, they need the blood, and because of that, they feed on many warm-blooded animals, including us. Like you saw in the video, it's not just humans. There are horses, dogs, cats. In fact, the West Nile virus is actually transmitted from horse to human via mosquitoes, right? So it's not just us in danger. There are a lot of other species also who are equally tormented by the mosquitoes. Okay, and this is the reason why they need blood, right? Why they feed, and because they are, they don't really stick to one type of species or only one organism, which is why they are infecting, like they're having cross infections across species, etc. Right? Okay. So this is just the basic thing. These are just some examples. I have just added here again, not asked right now, but just for your knowledge, if you would like to know. The female Aedes mosquitoes is the one which transmits dengue and chikungunya, both deadly. The female Anopheles mosquito transmits malaria, deadly again. And the female Culex mosquito transmits filaria and Japanese encephalitis. Japanese encephalitis is supposed to be one of the deadliest disease because it directly harms your brain, right? So once something has harmed your brain, it's very difficult to cure it, right? Encephalitis is one of the deadliest diseases. Okay. At least malaria, dengue, and chikungunya, you can be cured, you can get better and get well, right? But Japanese encephalitis, the chance of recovering is very, very low. Okay. Huh. Now also, there is this small block in your book, right, which is on this topic, peptic ulcers and Nobel Prize, right? Let me just show you where it is. It is well within the page 180, I guess. This block. This is the one I'm talking about. So peptic ulcers and the Nobel Prize, there is this small block kind of thing which is there on page 180, which also I realized yesterday I didn't add, so I just added it, right? Very interesting. Again, I'll just show you the video so that everything is clear. Then explaining it would be easier rather than explaining first. Okay. So ulcers are basically these really painful, you could say, uh, boil-like things, but they happen inside your stomach. They won't be on the surface.
My job is to make college
It's
easier
inside the
because
stomach,
students,
because of that,
Mike
it's
Harper,
really
an
painful.
econ major who piles on the
There's a lot
pressure,
of
Grammarly.
discomfort when you eat. Okay, stomach, region of the stomach, which is called peptic. Right, that's why that name. Oh, why are there so many ads here? Okay.
In 1984, an enterprising Australian doctor named Barry Marshall decided to take a risk. Too many of his patients were complaining of severe abdominal pain due to stomach ulcers, which are sores in the lining of the upper intestinal tract. At the time, few effective treatments for ulcers existed, and many sufferers required hospitalization or even surgery. Desperate for answers, Dr. Marshall swallowed a cloudy broth of bacteria collected from the stomach of one of his patients. Soon, Dr. Marshall was experiencing the same abdominal pain, bloating, and vomiting. 10 days later, a camera called an endoscope peered inside his insides. Marshall's stomach was teeming with the same bacteria as his patient. He'd also developed gastritis, or severe inflammation of the stomach, the hallmark precursor of ulcers. Dr. Marshall's idea challenged a misconception that still persists to this day, that ulcers are caused by stress, food, or too much stomach acid. Marshall thought the culprit was bacterial infections. Initially, his idea was considered crazy by the brightest medical minds on the planet. But in 2005, he and Dr. Robin Warren received the ultimate validation when they were awarded the Nobel Prize for Medicine. Our stomachs are J-shaped organs with surprisingly intricate ecosystems awash in hormones and chemicals. The stomach is under constant attack by digestive enzymes, bile, proteins, microbes, and the stomach's own acid. In response, it produces bicarbonate, mucus, and phospholipids called prostaglandins to maintain the integrity of its own lining. This delicate balance is constantly regulated and referred to as mucosal defense. Since the mid-1800s, doctors thought stress alone caused most stomach ulcers. Patients were given antidepressants or tranquilizers and told to visit health spas. This belief eventually shifted to the related notion of spicy foods and stress as culprits. Yet no convincing study has ever demonstrated that emotional upset, psychological distress, or spicy food directly causes ulcer disease. By the mid-20th century, it was widely accepted that excess hydrochloric acid prompted the stomach to eat itself. Fervent proponents of this idea were referred to as the acid mafia. The biggest hole in this theory was that antacids only provide temporary relief. We now know that some rare ulcers are indeed caused by too much hydrochloric acid, but they make up less than 1% of all cases. Dr. Marshall and Dr. Warren pinpointed a spiral-shaped bacteria called Helicobacter pylori, or H. pylori, as the real offender. H. pylori is one of humanity's oldest and most frequent companions, having joined us at least 50,000 years ago, and now found in 50% of people. Previously, we thought the stomach was sterile on account of it being such an acidic, hostile environment. Yet H. pylori survives the acidic turmoil of the stomach with a variety of features that disrupt mucosal defense in its favor. For example, it produces an enzyme called urease that helps protect it from the surrounding gastric acid. H. pylori can make over 1,500 proteins, many of which are dedicated to maximizing its virulence. We still have unanswered questions, like why specific people develop ulcers at particular times. However, we do know individual genetics, other medical problems, use of certain medications, smoking, and the genetic diversity of Helicobacter strains all play a role. In particular, certain pain medications used to reduce inflammation in joints have been discovered to work with H. pylori to create more severe stomach ulcers. Dr. Marshall ended up being fine after his famous, albeit dangerous, experiment. He ingested a course of antibiotics similar to the ones taken now for ulcers. To be treated by simple antibiotics is a modern triumph for a disease that previously needed surgery. Marshall's work also reminded us that scientific progress is not always smooth, but there's value in trusting your proverbial, and sometimes literal, gut. Did you enjoy this lesson? If so,
Right, so this video is all you need to understand that paragraph or that. Oh, yeah, this video is all you need to understand that paragraph which is there in the text, right? And this is why they have included it. Main reason for including it is because of the fact that ulcers were considered as diseases which needed surgery, right? So moving from something which needed surgery to be cured via antibiotics is a very big feat, right? Because of that, they've included it. And the second reason being that Dr. Barry Marshall, right, he was crazy enough to, inject himself or get himself, I don't know, what do you call it? It's not exactly ingest or give himself ulcer just to prove that it's not a lifestyle disease, right? So these are the names you need to remember: Robin Warren and Barry Marshall, right? The two people who received the Nobel Prize for Medicine in 2005, right? And yeah, this is it summarized. It's anytime you feel that you're not able to understand the explanation given in the text, or it's the same thing which I've mentioned here, because there's not much there's not much explanation, it's just facts, right? So if you feel you don't understand this, you can just watch the video anytime, right? I think the video is explained really well as to why they got the Nobel Prize and what peptic ulcers are. You don't need to know what are prostaglandins or how does the stomach protect itself from acid, all that. That is a little higher order things. Interesting to know, but not required at this stage, right? So if you just know this much, that, yeah, I'll just highlight it. If you know the names of the two scientists or doctors, right, is enough. And if you know that it is caused by this bacteria, Okay, it's called Helicobacter pylori, right? This is the bacteria. I will write it here. Okay, which causes ulcers, right? And what they did is the Marshall and Warren, they showed that they could be cured when the bacteria was killed off, which means by giving the patients antibiotics, right? And thanks to this, it is no longer a chronic, frequently disabling condition, right? It's a very painful and very troubling condition. Of course, you get better, but it's really uncomfortable, right? Okay. And from being such a disabling condition or a condition where you absolutely needed surgery, it's turned into a disease, an acute disease, which can be cured just by a short period of antibiotics, right? Which is why this is a really important and a really amazing case. Okay. Cool. Okay. Yeah, now we come to the next part. We've seen what diseases are, we've seen what causes diseases, we've seen how they spread. Now, the question which you might be having is, where do these microbes go? Right? Since this chapter has only infectious diseases, we're not really focusing on the non communicable or non infectious diseases or diseases which happen because of some genetic issues, things like that is not there right now, because those are a little complicated to understand that how do they come into picture or why does that happen, right? But infectious diseases are easy to understand and easy to comprehend also, that okay, this is why this happens and this is why this uh, a person may be more susceptible to infection, right? Okay, so the question which you get now is, once the microbes have spread, how do they know where to go? Like, do they carry a map as to which part of the body they need to go, right? How do they know where exactly they need to go if they've come inside a human, if they've come inside us, right? Okay, so organ specific and tissue specific manifestation answers that question. Manifestation basically means making a house. Okay, in simple words, if you want to translate or if you want to break down the word manifestation, in this aspect, it would just mean making a house, right? Okay, so do they make a house uh, in organs or in tissues is what is discussed here, right? So some of them go and make a house in the organs, some of them like to stay in the tissues. So who goes where is what is discussed in this entire paragraph, which is there in the text also. Okay, yeah. Where do they go? Different species of microbes have evolved to house in different parts of the body, which means they have evolved to get comfortable in different parts. Okay, and how do they decide where to get comfortable or where to stay is based on point of entry. Point of entry basically means if I'm talking about cold, then the virus enters through the nose, right? So point of entry would be basically the point where it enters from, where it enters the body, right? That's all is point of entry. Okay. We'll come back to this point in a bit. Before that, let us just see a couple of examples. Yeah. So these are some of the examples, right? For example, in TB, the point of entry is nose. So the microbes go wherever the nose ends. That would be, in this case, the organs, which is nothing but the lungs, right? Okay. Then in case of typhoid and jaundice, both the point of entry is mouth, right? But for typhoid, it stays in the gut lining, whereas for jaundice, the microbes go in the liver. Okay, so you can see in this example itself that even though they have the same point of entry, they are going to different places. Like the typhoid microbes, they decide to stay in the gut lining, which means anywhere in the alimentary canal, anywhere between the stomach and the intestines, they can stay. They're comfortable there. Whereas the microbes causing jaundice, they like to go and stay in the liver. So is this always the case? Is it always based on only the point of entry? No, right? Because they can go in different places. And also, I will give you a couple of more examples where the point of entry is somewhere else, but they eventually end up going somewhere else, right? So this is not always the case. Okay, for example, you can see here. Here it is. There are more examples here, right? For example, we saw TB, then we saw typhoid jaundice. Yeah, now if you look at AIDS as an example, okay? So they enter through sexual contact, but they affect the lymph nodes, okay? They don't really affect your sexual organs or anywhere in that region, but they directly go and attack the lymph node, which means it's not always just based on the point of entry. Okay, even in case of vectors like mosquitoes. Okay, the mosquito bites you anywhere in your body. It could be your arm, your leg, right? So they don't really stay in the bloodstream, or they don't go the closest tissue next to the bloodstream, right? They can go to different places. Like for example, in case of malaria, they go to the liver and then they infect all the RBCs. And in case of dengue, they go to the capillaries, right? Yeah, and in case of Japanese encephalitis, which is also spread by mosquitoes, they end up going to the brain, right? So it's not just based on this, but yeah, they like to choose based on how they enter, and based on that, they can go anywhere. Okay. Yeah. So the signs and symptoms of a disease thus will depend on where they are, right? So what does this line mean is that if suppose you are having if suppose the microbes for cold have entered your body, or let's take the example of COVID itself, right? Example, the COVID virus has entered your body. Okay, so we know now that it will target the lungs, right? It is going to target the respiratory tract and your lungs in particular, right? So obviously your symptoms will be ones which are pertaining to respiration, right? Either you'll have shortness of breath, either you'll have a runny nose, you'll have a cough, or you'll be sneezing, right? So because of where it the microbe chooses to go and stay, your symptoms and signs will be on those lines. That's what this means, right? It will depend on where the microbe targets or where it decides to go and stay. Right? It won't decide to go and stay in a new place every time, right? A new place would be either when the virus mutates, right? It comes in new variants. In those kind of cases, maybe it could go to a new place, but mostly the place is fixed, right? Only you have different symptoms and different signs, which can show up differently. Okay. And why is this important? Why do we need to know where that microbe is going and staying? Right? Why is it necessary? Like we can just give medicine. That medicine will find it, or the immune system will find it, and it will go and kill it. Right? Why do we need to know where it is targeting, or whether it is the lungs, or whether it is the brain, whether it is the lymph nodes? Why do we need to know? Right? So we need to know that is because we can imagine what the symptoms and signs would be if we know where the target organ is, right? And what the functions carried out by this target organ. Like once we know that COVID attacks the lungs and the respiratory tract, you can easily predict the symptoms yourself that, yeah, you'll have something like runny nose, cough, sneezing, etc. So you'll immediately know that these are all the things you need to look for. Or you can even go vice versa, right? Suppose you see a person who's having continuous, let's say, stomach pain and has fever. So you'll immediately say, okay, have you eaten something wrong? Right? That will be your first guess. How does that guess come into picture is because of this. Because we know that if your stomach hurts or there is some problem there, which means there is a possibility that some microbe is there in the stomach, right? Okay. So this is why organ specific and tissue specific manifestation is important, right? I know this word itself, this sentence itself sounds a bit difficult to understand, organ specific and tissue specific manifestation, but just think of as in saying where does the microbe go or where does it live. Just think of it that way, then it will hopefully it will seem a little bit simpler, right? Okay, we saw this. Yeah. And now we also have something called common effects, right? So apart from showing symptoms, like you take example of COVID, again I will take that same example, right? It goes to the lungs, right? So now you have two types of symptoms which will be shown, or two types of effects. One will be which are specific to the respiratory tract, something like sneezing, coughing, etc. Get it, right? Runny nose, you can add a list here. And the other will be what are called common effects. Okay. Common effects are usually the effects which the immune system does whenever there is something wrong in the body. For example, the most common one would be you get fever. No matter what happens to you, the first thing, like no matter what microbe or what disease or what infection you might get, your first response will always be fever. Why is that? Is because the immune system immediately tells the body that something is wrong. So please increase the temperature and make sure that these microbes don't survive that, and also give a signal saying that there is something wrong, right? So fever and what is called inflammation are what are called the common effects. Okay, I've continued it here, inflammation. Okay, yeah. So this is what happens. The immune system. So immune system, you can think of them as an army. Okay, there is an army of cells. Okay, who guard your body. Okay, they have these are arms and ammunitions, and they basically guard your body. So if you consider this fort to be your body, the immune system guards your body. So immediately whenever there is a small attack, whenever there is a microbe, let's say this is a microbe, okay, whenever it tries to attack or whenever it has attacked, the immune system will immediately release its army to go and find out who is that person who's come to attack us, or what is happening, why is it come, right? So this fight which happens between the immune system and the microbes leads to this something called as inflammation, right? Again, I'm putting it in very simple words so that you understand. There is a really complicated and several step procedure which happens. It's not really as simple as that, that the entire army will be dispatched and then they'll kill it and done. There are different types of cells, right? And each cell has a different function. So the immune system will tell that particular cell which has the function of killing to go and kill it, right? So all those things, they happen by chemical transmission, right? So yeah, in short, this is what would happen, right? And because of this interaction between the immune system and the microbe, you always have inflammation, right? And as a part of this process referring to inflammation, right? As part of inflammation, there are local effects such as swelling, pain, and general effects such as fever, right? So even if you fall and hurt yourself, right? Even if you've fallen and you get a sprain, let's say you sprained your ankle, okay? You notice that you'll get fever, right? Now, what has ankle spraining got to do with microbe, right? There is no infection. Then why do you get a fever? Is because of this. Even if you sprain your ankle, immediately your ankle will get swollen. You will be in pain and you will get fever, because that's the way or the signal which your body or the immune system sends to your body telling that something is wrong. Okay. So this is what inflammation is. This is again frequently asked. That is why I'm spending time and explaining it in detail, right? They ask you what is inflammation and what are the things which happen in inflammation, right? The things which happen would be swelling, pain, and fever. Huh. Now, yesterday, I think yesterday also I spoke about what happens in HIV/AIDS, right? HIV/AIDS is a interesting topic of study for this chapter only because the way it works, everything is different. Let me just list it down here. Okay, so the disease is called AIDS. Okay, the full form is acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. Again, I'm not sure if it's asked or not frequently asked, right? You want me to write the full form? I'll write it. Acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. This is what AIDS stands for. And it is caused by something called HIV, which is the human immunovirus. Okay. So it is a viral infection or a viral disease caused by HIV. Okay. And it spreads via sexual contact or when you have when you use used needles, right? Or it could be transmitted from mother to child as well, unborn child, right? Okay. Yeah, so this is the cause, how it is spread, etc. So now what happens in HIV AIDS is even though it is spread via sexual contact or from the mother to the child, it goes and attacks what is known as the lymph nodes. Okay. Lymph nodes, you can call them as places where this army is sitting. Okay, your immune system army. Suppose even if you consider any army or even if you take some game for example, do you all play any game, any mobile game which has like where you need to defeat people, anything like that?
Call of Duty.
Okay, Call of Duty. Okay. So, okay, whatever you might be playing some game or you might have seen some movie or something, right? So whenever you say army, the army is located at different places, right? So suppose this is your entire kingdom. Okay, I've drawn it in a very small area, right? But definitely the kingdom will be huge, right? So army is always placed in the strategic points in the kingdom, right? Places like where the mountains are, or places where you want to protect, like suppose the main capital city, things like that. Okay. Yeah. So basically, it is spread over. It's not just in one place. The entire army won't be standing only in one place. Is what I'm trying to say. They'll be spread over a region, right? So lymph nodes are what are those regions? Okay, you can think of it that way. They are the regions where this army is located. So this AIDS directly goes and attacks the army itself, which means the chances of fighting or winning against it become very low because they already know where your places are, so they know where to go and attack exactly. Right. So now what happens is AIDS, the virus goes and attacks the army, and let me use some different colors. Yeah. Okay. Suppose this is the virus which is attacking. Okay. And this is the army fighting back. Okay. So they keep fighting, and over a period of time, what happens is this virus wins. HIV wins. Okay. Wins means your army is losing, which means your number of people who are trying to save you is coming down, isn't it? And because of this, you get AIDS. Okay, this is what is called AIDS because you're losing your immune system, you're losing the number of soldiers who are fighting for you. And because of that, even a very simple infection or very simple cold can transform into something very deadly like pneumonia, right? And can take you out completely. So this is what happens in AIDS. This is very simple language. Again, I'm trying to explain. Of course, there is a huge complicated thing which happen, but this is the only thing. This is a special thing which happens in AIDS because of which it is a really deadly disease. So your immune system gets compromised completely, and even a very small infection. Here, I'm taking an example of common cold, right, which can become pneumonia. Anything other than that also can become very serious, which is why people with AIDS, they say they have shorter lifespan, right? They have limited days, things like that. and it's difficult to cure it because we are not able to figure out how to stop this attack itself. Okay, so yeah, this is exactly what is explained in the textbook also in a small paragraph way with respect to this tissue specificity. Okay, so like I said, it goes and it attacks the lymph nodes, right? So the tissue specificity of the infection leads to very general seeming effects. Very general seeming effects means you might just get fever, you might just be in pain. There won't be a real anything which will be shown or you can catch on to or say that yeah, this person has some kind of problem. There will be just very general effects, right? For example, in HIV, virus goes to the immune system and damages its function, right? So many of the effects of HIV AIDS are because the body can no longer fight off the many minor infections that we face every day. We would be normal people, right? Normal healthy people face every day, which you might not even know, right? So your body is by default fighting them and ensuring you don't get infected. But in case of people who are infected with HIV, this is not the case, right? Instead, very small cold can become pneumonia. Minor gut infection can lead to major diarrhea with blood loss, right? And ultimately, it is these other infections that kill people suffering from AIDS, right? So HIV is not the one which is fatal. It is because your immune system or your army, army becomes very weak. It's not able to fight, right? That is what makes this a disease fatal. Okay, yeah. Okay. There's also one paragraph there in the textbook. I thought I'll explain it. Okay. Now the next question you get is that, okay, now you know where the microbe is going, you know how it is spread, you know what causes it, but you might have a question that take the example of COVID itself, right? Why only some people are getting infected with COVID? Why the others are not, right? If you might have heard, even in around you, whenever they say there are cases, or like if you stay in an apartment area or a society, there might be people next to your building or so who might have got COVID. But if you would have noticed, the entire family would not have got. Like only two people in that family would have got, but the other three didn't get. Something like that. Have you seen such kind of things? No? Have you heard that anybody around you used to get COVID? Not now, I mean, maybe earlier part of the year or last year.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay. Yeah. So the trend which people observed was that suppose there's a family of like say five people, okay, and out of that two used to get, but three used to not get, even though they are staying in the same house. Something like this used to happen, right? So this is the question you might get, even when you probably, if I take a simpler example, when you used to go to school, uh, right? When you used to be in the physical classroom, there is chances like yeah, there would be somebody in your class, at least one person at a time, who might be having cold, right? One person who has cold, and the rest of you are also sitting with around that person or sitting in the same,
Yes, ma'am.
right? But if you notice, the rest of you, let's say there are like 50 people in the class, if one has cold, all 49 will not get cold, right? There might be maximum two or three people who will get that cold. So why does this happen? Why is it severe for some people, and why do some people not get it, or why is it less for some people? Why are the effects less for some people? This is also very interesting area of study, right? It depends on multiple things. First one would be, it depends on the number of microbes in the body, right? Suppose you have taken take again the example of COVID, take the masks and etc., which I was saying, right? Now suppose you have worn a mask, right? This is you wearing a mask, right? And you come in contact with a person who is having, I'm just putting a C on top, right? And you've come in contact with a person having COVID or had COVID or whatever, since we don't really know at what point the spread stops, right? But because you've worn a mask and you've maintained 6 feet distance and you've taken all precautions, the number of microbes entering your body will be very low, right? So it's easy to fight off, well, let's say there are just like, for example, there are just like 50 microbes which have entered, right? So it's easy for your immune system or easy for your army to fight off these just 50 microbes. Whereas if you take another person who has, let's say, not worn a mask, who's standing very close, right? Or for whatever reason, the number of microbes entered into this person, let's say it's become 1,000. Okay. Microbes are never in this small value. They're always in thousands and millions. But this is just for example. So I'm taking tiny numbers just to explain. Right? Okay. So let's say this person did not wear mask. This person did not take all the precautions. So the number of microbes entering into this person will be higher. Right? So your army has to work for a longer time to fight these microbes, and there is a chance that it might get tired easily or it might not be able to fight all of them, right? So this is what it means. So if it's not able to fight all of them, there is a chance that you might also get that same infection. Okay. So if the number of microbes is very small, the disease manifestations might be minor or unnoticed, right? It can either fight off without even telling you that you had it, or it might be at a very low level that you wouldn't even come to know, right? Whereas if the number is same is large, the disease can be severe enough to be life threatening. Same, for example, you take COVID. Some people who have got COVID, it's okay if they are at home, if they are quarantined at home. Okay. Whereas for some people, they had to be hospitalized, right? Why is that? Say, this reason. Because the number of microbes might be varying, right? This is not the only reason. This could be one reason, right? The other reason would be this. The other reason would be your immune system, right? Suppose you already have a weak immune system. Like even now, if you seeing the news or the what do you say, information regarding COVID, they ask people or aged people, elderly people, people having heart conditions, diabetes, or any other chronic diseases, they are asking them to be more careful. Why is that? Is because their immune system is already involved in taking care of whatever heart disease or diabetes or whatever they are suffering from. So it's already preoccupied, and if it is exposed to these microbes, it has to do a lot of extra work, right? More than it can actually complete or achieve, and then the chance of getting infected becomes higher. Okay. Yeah, so your immune system will determine the number of microbes, whether it can fight it off, how good it is, right? Whether it can fight it off or not. And how do you maintain a good immune system is by staying fit, staying healthy. Like for example, if you don't either you can take health supplements like vitamins, etc., right? Those kind of things, or you can take whatever natural supplements like neem, tulsi, those kind of things, right? It again differs from person to person, so there's no standard formula that if you do this your immune system will be better, right? And there are some people who already have weak immune system due to genetic conditions or some condition, right? So for them things will be different. So everybody's immune system is different. So based on that, the number of microbes in your body will be different. Okay. Okay. Ha, there's one more video for you. This is on immune system. This is exactly explaining whatever I said, that how your immune system fights off things, or how does it know that it can take out these many microbes, or whether it's.
Let me tell you about this amazing offer from Udemy. Right now, bored of you and you want to learn something you've always wanted to know. Now is the time. If you don't know about Udemy, we're an online. That's actually what I love the most about Udemy.
This is how fast YouTube is with
A mosquito lands on your arm, injects its chemicals into your skin, and begins to feed. You wouldn't even know it was there if not for the red lump that appears, accompanied by a telltale itch. It's a nuisance, but that bump is an important signal that you're protected by your immune system, your body's major safeguard against infection, illness, and disease. This system is a vast network of cells, tissues, and organs that coordinate your body's defenses against any threats to your health. Without it, you'd be exposed to billions of bacteria, viruses, and toxins that could make something as minor as a paper cut or a seasonal cold fatal. The immune system relies on millions of defensive white blood cells, also known as leukocytes, that originate in our bone marrow. These cells migrate into the bloodstream and the lymphatic system, a network of vessels which helps clear bodily toxins and waste. Our bodies are teeming with leukocytes. There are between 4,000 and 11,000 in every microliter of blood. As they move around, leukocytes work like security personnel, constantly screening the blood, tissues, and organs for suspicious signs. This system mainly relies on cues called antigens. These molecular traces on the surface of pathogens and other foreign substances betray the presence of invaders. As soon as the leukocytes detect them, it takes only minutes for the body's protective immune response to kick in. Threats to our bodies are hugely variable, so the immune response has to be equally adaptable. That means relying on many different types of leukocytes to tackle threats in different ways. Despite this diversity, we classify leukocytes in two main cellular groups, which coordinate a two-pronged attack. First, phagocytes trigger the immune response by sending macrophages and dendritic cells into the blood. As these circulate, they destroy any foreign cells they encounter, simply by consuming them. That allows phagocytes to identify the antigen on the invaders they just ingested and transmit this information to the second major cell group orchestrating the defense, the lymphocytes. A group of lymphocyte cells called T cells go in search of infected body cells and swiftly kill them off. Meanwhile, B cells and helper T cells use the information gathered from the unique antigens to start producing special proteins called antibodies. This is the pièce de résistance. Each antigen has a unique matching antibody that can latch onto it like a lock and key and destroy the invading cells. B cells can produce millions of these, which then cycle through the body and attack the invaders until the worst of the threat is neutralized. While all of this is going on, familiar symptoms like high temperatures and swelling are actually processes designed to aid the immune response. A warmer body makes it harder for bacteria and viruses to reproduce and spread because they're temperature sensitive. And when body cells are damaged, they release chemicals that make fluid leak into the surrounding tissues, causing swelling. That also attracts phagocytes, which consume the invaders and the damaged cells. Usually, an immune response will eradicate a threat within a few days. It won't always stop you from getting ill, but that's not its purpose. Its actual job is to stop a threat from escalating to dangerous levels inside your body. And through constant surveillance over time, the immune system provides another benefit. It helps us develop long-term immunity. When B and T cells identify antigens, they can use that information to recognize invaders in the future. So when a threat revisits, the cells can swiftly deploy the right antibodies to tackle it before it affects any more cells. That's how you can develop immunity to certain diseases, like chickenpox. It doesn't always work so well. Some people have autoimmune diseases, which trick the immune system into attacking the body's own perfectly healthy cells. No one knows exactly what causes them, but these disorders sabotage the immune system to varying degrees and underlie problems like arthritis, type 1 diabetes, and multiple sclerosis. For most individuals, however, a healthy immune system will successfully fight off an estimated 300 colds and innumerable other potential infections over the course of a lifetime. Without it, those threats would escalate into something far more dangerous. So the next time you catch a cold or scratch a mosquito bite, think of the immune system. We owe it our lives.
Ted.
So this is in short the immune system, right? So yeah, like they explained, there are different cells called phagocytes, leukocytes, B cells, T cells. There's a whole huge network. And like I was mentioning yesterday, you have an entire course. You can take up something called immunology, wherein you'll be studying all of this itself, right? It's a very, very vast subject. And yeah, of course, if you take up medicine, you will be doing it. If you take up any biology related major, you'll be doing it. But as itself, as a in itself also, it is a course which you can take up and study, right? So in that they explain the last part which was there in the video, which is mainly the fact that yeah, which is the fact that the immune cells or the army, right, they recognize antigens, right? This is a really very, very important application, very important property, right? Because of this, this is how we are able to prevent a lot of diseases from happening, and this forms the basis of something called vaccination, right? We'll do this in the last slide or the last chapter, last part of the chapter, wherein the methods of preventing the disease. We'll be talking only about this idea, how the immune system is able to recognize and remember. So even if it's exposed to that antigen just once, and even if it's exposed to something looking like that antigen and not even the entire antigen, it can recognize it and it can create antibodies. So antigens are basically, you can think of it like this. You can think of it as a lock and key mechanism. Okay. So if there is some kind of a pattern like this, so the antibody will create an exact opposite pattern fitting it. So the antigen antibody work like a lock and key mechanism, right? So if you show them the lock just once, they'll keep producing the keys for it, something like that. Okay. Or if you just show them the pattern of the lock, that it's something like this, and like this, the immune system can just take this and create the key for it. Okay, this is a very important application of the immune system. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, immune system. Yeah, the entire thing is just written in para formation. I thought we could just see a video because animations always help in remembering better, right? Okay, so you can read this later. It's the same. Not all those exposed to microbes suffer. Why is that? Because your immune system is different from different people, right? They are the ones which help fight off microbes, and once they are successful, we don't come, but we don't get infected with the disease or we don't get anything, right? Because they kill it long before they assume major proportions, before they can take over the body, right? Okay. And when they are not able to fight it off is when they take over the body, and that's when we need to either rest or we need to help the immune system by taking some medicines, etc., to get rid of it, right? Yeah, now we come to the last part of the chapter, which is principles of treatment and prevention. Principles of prevention, right? When you try to treat the disease, there are two ways you will try to treat it. One is when you try to reduce the effects of the disease. Effects of the disease as in any of the symptoms which the disease is causing, right? Suppose you have fever, you have a runny nose. Okay, I'll just, for example, write here. Suppose you have a fever, you have a runny nose, and you're sneezing, right? So before going to the doctor, you don't immediately go to the doctor, right? First, what you'll do is you will take, you'll rest, or you'll put a cold cloth on your forehead so that your fever comes down. For runny nose, you'll have soups or any hot liquids, right? Okay, yeah. For sneezing, also same. Whatever hot liquids or hot fluids, you'll be taking all that, right? Only once after some time, when this doesn't subside, or you feel that you're not getting any relief, that's when you go to the doctor and you're like, okay, I'm having something, it's not coming down. Yeah, we might have to take some medicine or something like that, right? Or sometimes you even take medicine to just bring down the fever as well, right? Very common medicines to bring down the fever, etc. Right? So that's how you reduce the effects of the disease. Oh, let me clear this. Yeah. So basically, you bring down the symptoms, which are because of the inflammation. So inflammation is a mixture of swelling, pain, and fever, right? So you try to bring those three down. For example, you can take down medicines to bring down fever, reduce pain, or lose motion. Right? You can take bed rest so that you conserve your energy because you start feeling tired, right? Okay. Yeah. And why? Yeah. And most important point is that this is generally not enough to get rid of microbes. Okay, this might be enough to make you feel better for a while, but in case the uh, microbes have blown out of proportion in the body, and how do you know that they have blown out of proportion is when you don't feel better even after treating the effects of the disease. That's when you know that you need to kill the microbes. That's when you go to the doctor and you're like, hey, I think I am having something. Please check and give me medicines, right? Yeah. So you use medicines, which are generally what are called as antibiotics. Okay, they kill the microbes. So yeah, here you can see you can take care of yourself when you get fever versus you take antibiotics. Now, one more part is there is how do antibiotics work, right? How do they work is microorganisms, which are mainly one of these groups. Either they can be virus, they can be fungi, bacteria, or protozoa. Okay, all have some essential biochemical life process. Biochemical basically means they work, the different parts come together to produce some chemicals, and those chemicals relay the different life processes like simple respiration, digestion, etc. All the life process, right? Just like we have, similarly, the microorganisms will also have, right? Which is peculiar to that group. So they have different things which are peculiar to the group itself and not shared with any other group. Which means the viral biochemical mechanisms will be peculiar to the viral group. Bacterial will be peculiar to bacteria. They will not be seen in fungi, right? Something like that. Okay. So what these antibiotics do is they find this peculiar or this particular biochemical life process and they attack it and they make sure to shut it down. Okay. For example, I can give you a very simple example of virus here. Okay. Viruses, they are usually of this form. Okay. And most of them have something called as spike proteins. Okay. This cap like thing which I'm showing is a spike protein. Okay. So this spike protein is a characteristic of the virus itself. Okay. You don't see it in bacteria, you don't see it in fungi, etc. So all the medicines which we try to make for viruses, right? We try to attack this itself so that when the virus can't produce this, it is an essential part for the virus to continue its life process. So when you target this and you say no, you can't produce it or you shut down that process, the virus can't continue with its life process and hence will get eliminated, right? Something like on the same line, something for bacteria, something for protozoa. Like for bacteria, they have given you an example of penicillin, right? Penicillin is the first antibiotic which was discovered, okay, and it is still widely used to treat a huge array of bacterial diseases. So penicillin, what does it do is the bacteria, they have this, suppose this is your bacteria, okay. The bacteria produces something called as a cell wall, a characteristic cell wall, not something called a cell wall, yeah, a characteristic cell wall via a process. Okay, they have a special kind of cell wall which it produces via a process. So what penicillin does is it stops this process so that the cell wall is not produced, and because the bacteria has one of its main components missing, it can't continue its life processes, right? And hence you can eliminate. That's how it is used as an antibiotic. Okay. So yeah, that's how you make antibiotics and that's how you create medicines, right? So you basically you find that pathway which is a peculiar feature or which is unique to that group, and you attack that. And what one more thing which we have seen is, suppose creation of bacterial cell wall is unique to bacteria, it is seen that most of the bacterial groups have this feature. Okay, like for example, virus have spike proteins, and most of the viruses, it's not just like one virus, no, there's a family of viruses. So all of them have this similar thing, is what it's noticed. So if it works for one, it works for most, something of that sort. Okay, right? Yeah. And this is the very important give reason which is almost always asked, right? Always asked. I've seen it in whatever paper, whichever I've seen in the past few years, I've always seen this question. So this question is one which you must know and you must be able to answer at any point of time, right? Okay. Again, I made it simple, so hopefully, yeah, it will be easier for you to remember. Okay. So one reason why making antiviral medicines is harder than making antibacterial medicines is that viruses have a few biochemical mechanisms of their own. Okay. So what happens with virus is that, suppose this is your virus. Okay. With its protein. Okay. So this virus is a very, very smart fellow. What it does is, on its own, it can't live. Okay. It can't live on its own. It needs somebody else to survive. And that somebody else is what we call host. Okay. So this virus goes and infects different types of hosts. For example, if it goes into a human being, let me take some blue color. Okay. So if it comes in the human, what it does, it will find some cell and then it will form this kind of shape, for example. Okay. Square shape. Whereas if it goes to, let me take some brown color. Okay. Whereas it goes to, let's say, if it infects a horse, then it might form this kind of shape. Okay. Again, this is all just to explain to you. It's not like this. No, the process doesn't happen like this. It's complicated. But basically, what I'm trying to say is the virus doesn't survive on its own. It adapts to the host machinery. So, whatever machinery the host has, it takes that form. For example, if humans have this kind of pattern, it will take on that kind of pattern and then it will continue its life process. Like similar for horse, if it has this pattern, it will take on this shape and it will continue its life process and it will ensure that it survives. Okay. So because you don't know what form it is going to take, it's very difficult to produce drugs which will kill the virus, right? Unless you know that yes, it's going to take this form for sure. Like bacteria, no matter what happens, it's going to produce this cell wall. So you can eliminate it wherever it goes. You can just eliminate that cell wall and you're done with it. But you don't know what the virus is going to do, because of which you cannot make anything which will particularly, uh, you know, destroy or make sure that that process is stopped. Okay, that's what this entire paragraph means basically. If you just understood these 2 points, this is sufficient to answer this give reason, right? So what do viruses do is they enter our cells and they use our machinery for their life processes. Okay, something like parasites, right? Okay, this means that there are relatively few virus-specific targets to aim at. Despite this limitation, there are now effective antiviral drugs, for example, drugs that keep HIV infection under control, right? So it took a lot of study. It takes a lot of time to come up with one. In fact, even for COVID, I'm not sure if you follow the news. Even for COVID, they finally came out with antiviral drugs, right? Okay, which are effective in treating COVID. So I mean, in 2020 first phase, first part of the year when we just discovered COVID, we didn't really have any medicine and that's why it was blowing out of proportion, right? Because of exact same reason that we can't really produce antiviral medicine without understanding what this virus is doing. And to understand that, it takes a huge amount of time, right? Still, but So many scientists, they were working together across the globe, right? That's why they still somehow they got it really quickly. Okay. Yeah. So this is it. Just because you don't know what the virus is going to do, what shape or what form it will take up, it doesn't have anything unique to itself, right? Even though these spike proteins are unique to itself, they go and change the shape or they change the pattern based on where they go, right? Okay. Because of that, it's difficult to make antiviral medicines compared to antibacterial ones. Okay. Now we come to what are the limitations when you deal with infectious diseases, right? So there are some limitations. Why are we talking this is you might say that we have medicines to treat diseases, right? We have things to treat fever, cold, or the symptoms, general effects also, right? Then why should we look at preventive measures, right? It's not that uncomfortable. And infectious diseases, if you get infectious diseases, I mean, they're acute diseases, so you'll be fine after some time. So why do we need to take preventive measures, right? So if you ask that question, this is your answer. Why do you need to take preventive measures? Is because once someone has a disease, their body functions are damaged and may never recover completely. Okay. Again, this is specific to certain diseases, not for all. Right? For example, if you have cold, nothing is going to happen to you. You're going to be completely fine once the cold also goes. But suppose you have some deadly diseases like malaria, like typhoid, okay, like dengue, something like that. Okay. Your body functions are really damaged. They don't go back to 100% to what they were before, right? So some part of it definitely gets damaged, and that's why you don't go back to what you were before you got that disease. Okay, that's one reason. Second reason is the treatment takes time, right? Whatever it is, even if it's a bacterial infection, even if it's viral infection, right? The treatment takes time. It takes at least a week, right? At least a week to get better. Sometimes for some diseases, it takes at least a week for the symptoms to start showing up, which means it will take way more time to get better. You take COVID only for example, right? The symptoms or the signs of COVID, they start showing up only after a week, right? After 6 to 7 days. So once you know you have COVID, only after that you will start taking medicine, right? Till that time you'll be just like, oh, let me sleep it off, or let me just have hot water and try doing this or doing that, right? So once you diagnose that, then you start taking treatment, right? And then it will take that much time, at least a week more to get better, which means effectively 2 weeks you are going to be at a you know not going to be at your optimum state, right? You can be bedridden, right? All those things. And the third reason is the person suffering from infectious diseases can serve as the source from where the infection may spread to other people. Very important, right? This is the reason why COVID turned into a pandemic so quickly, right? The only reason. Okay, because we cannot stop the spread of infectious diseases quickly, right? You can't tell people, no. Even now when so many rules and regulations are in place, you now when people are asked that to don't gather, don't form crowds, COVID hasn't really gone. Don't uh, remove your masks, etc. People don't listen, right? Because we feel that we can't see it, which means it doesn't really hurt us or it doesn't really affect us. That's what everybody feels, right? So you cannot really stop people from infecting others, or you can't really say that, this person is infected, so they have infected these many people. This is in fact what happened initially in 2020. That's how it went out of proportion, right? Even if one person had it and they didn't know, they used to go to a get together, or they used to go to parties or meet people where there were 20 or 50 people, and then now you have no idea how many of those 20 or 50 people are infected, right? This is how it goes out of proportion, which is why we always say that prevention is better than cure, right? So your principles of prevention are again two. So principles of treatment are two. One is you take care of the general effects of the disease, and the other is you kill the microbes. And principles of prevention are also two, which are one is general ways of preventing exposure, and another is the specific way. Okay. So this is the general ways. These are some of the examples you can, yeah, you can take note or you can use whenever it's asked in a question. What are the ways of preventing infectious diseases, right? So how do you prevent exposure is for different types of infections, you can do different things. Like for example, again, take the case of COVID, right? To prevent exposure, what did they do? They stopped all trains, right? They stopped transport. They closed all the restaurants, movie theaters, etc. Right? Places wherever crowds gather, they closed that, right? This is all to prevent exposure. Okay. So what do? You for airborne, you visit for airborne infections. You stop visiting public places. You cover your nose and mouth while coughing, etc. Right. For waterborne infections, you drink clean and boil drinking water. What is this thinking water? Drinking water. Right. Okay. For vector-borne infections, keep the surroundings clean. Don't keep puddle of water open, right? There is regular fumigation which is happening everywhere, right? All those things. And there you are always advised not to keep water collected in buckets or any containers for a long time, right? Next thing would be you improve your immune system, right? Availability of proper and sufficient food for everyone. Ensure you are having enough nourishment, well balanced meal, so that your immune system can fight off whenever required. Again, these are some of the examples. Of course, you can extend this and add a lot of things, right? Okay. And then you have one more method, which is specific method, which is what is called immunization, right? Uh, Yeah, so we spoke about the special property of immune system, right? Which it can remember microbes and then whenever it comes later on. That's what is called acquired immunity actually. You might study this in next year or maybe in the future year if you take up science or bio, right? What is innate immunity, acquired immunity, etc. All that. Yeah, so immune system remembers microbes and it can fight it off whenever it comes up later on in life, right? So that is the principle we use to create vaccines and to vaccinate people, right? So you can call this immunization, or if you don't remember, you can call vaccination also. It is the one and the same thing, right? Okay. So yeah, the same explanation is mentioned here. This is the basis for principle of immunization, right? Okay. What is immunization? If you want to know the definition, it is a process by which an individual's immune system becomes fortified. Fortified means it is strong enough or it's stable enough to fight an infectious agent, right? And what is a vaccine is nothing but a preparation that is used to stimulate the body's immune response against diseases, right? So again, if you take the example of COVID, the general ways of preventing, I gave you examples, right? We shut off trains, we shut off restaurant, theaters, etc. We said no crowding, no crowding in public places, maintaining distance, all that is general. And specific was we rolled out vaccines, right? Lot of different brands, different types of vaccines, etc. Right? So again, vaccination is a huge field where you have different types of vaccine based on how they are prepared, right? Does it have the live microbe, or does it have the semi-killed version of microbe, or does it have just the pattern of the microbe, right? Based on that, you have different types of vaccines. Okay. Okay. Like these are some of the examples which are of vaccines which are there in use or there uh, traveling around, out of which you might have taken most of them, right? It's mandatory for kids below 5 years to take vaccines, right? Most of the vaccines in our country. These are some of them. There's one more which is called MMR, which is mumps, measles, and rubella, right? That's also a vaccine which is there even to kids. This definitely everybody has taken, right? The polio vaccine for polio. There's one more called DPT, which is for diphtheria and pertussis. There is hepatitis vaccine, which is for hepatitis B. There is BCG vaccine for tuberculosis, right? Okay. Some examples of vaccines, right? And yeah, that's it. I wanted to show you two videos. Let me just show you. One is this and one is yeah. One is how diseases spread and
The sun is shining. The birds. You're walking happily in the park when, achoo! A passing stranger has expelled mucus and saliva from their mouth and nose. You can feel the droplets of moisture land on your skin, but what you can't feel are the thousands or even millions of microscopic germs that have covertly traveled through the air and onto your pounds. It's actually very common for our bodies to be exposed to disease-causing germs. And most of the time, it's not nearly as obvious. Germs are found on almost every surface we come into contact with. When we talk about germs, we're actually referring to many different kinds of microscopic organisms, including bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and viruses. But what our germs all have in common is the ability to interact with our bodies and change how we feel and function. Scientists who study infectious diseases have wondered for decades why it is that some of these germs are relatively harmless, while others cause devastating effects and can sometimes be fatal. We still haven't solved the entire puzzle, but what we do know is that the harmfulness or virulence of a germ is a result of evolution. How can it be that the same evolutionary process can produce germs that cause very different levels of harm? The answer starts to become clear if we think about a germ's mode of transmission, which is the strategy it uses to get from one host to the next. A common mode of transmission occurs through the air, like the sneeze you just witnessed. And one germ that uses this method is the rhinovirus, which replicates in our upper airways and is responsible for up to half of all common colds. Now imagine that after the sneeze, one of 3 hypothetical varieties of rhinovirus, let's call them too much, too little, and just right, has been lucky enough to land on you. These viruses are hardwired to replicate, but because of genetic differences, they will do so at different rates. Too much multiplies very often, making it very successful in the short run. However, this success comes at a cost to you, the host. A quickly replicating virus can cause more damage to your body, making cold symptoms more severe. If you're too sick to leave your home, you don't give the virus any opportunities to jump to a new host. And if the disease should kill you, the virus's own life cycle will end along with yours. Too little, on the other hand, multiplies rarely and causes you little harm in the process. Although this leaves you healthy enough to interact with other potential hosts, the lack of symptoms means you may not sneeze at all. Or if you do, there may be too few viruses in your mucus to infect anyone else. Meanwhile, just right has been replicating quickly enough to ensure that you're carrying sufficient amounts of the virus to spread, but not so often that you are too sick to get out of bed. And in the end, it's the one that will be most successful at transmitting itself to new hosts and giving rise to the next generation. This describes what scientists call trade-off hypothesis. First developed in the early 1980s, it predicts that germs will evolve to maximize their overall success by achieving a balance between replicating within a host, which causes virulence, and transmission to a new host. In the case of the rhinovirus, the hypothesis predicts that its evolution will favor less virulent forms because it relies on close contact to get to its next victim. For the rhinovirus, a mobile host is a good host, and indeed, that is what we see. While most people experience a runny nose, coughing, and sneezing, the common cold is generally mild and only lasts about a week. It would be great if the story ended there, but germs use many other modes of transmission. For example, the malaria parasite, Plasmodium, is transmitted by mosquitoes. Unlike the rhinovirus, it doesn't need us to be up and about, and may even benefit from harming us since a sick and immobile person is easier for mosquitoes to bite. We would expect germs that depend less on host mobility, like those transmitted by insects, water, or food, to cause more severe symptoms. So, what can we do to reduce the harmfulness of infectious diseases? Evolutionary biologist Dr. Paul Ewald has suggested that we can actually direct their evolution through simple disease control methods. By mosquito-proofing houses, establishing clean water systems, or staying home when we get a cold, we can obstruct the transmission strategies of harmful germs while creating a greater dependence on host mobility. So, while traditional methods of trying to eradicate germs may only breed stronger ones in the long run, this innovative approach of encouraging them to evolve milder forms could be a win-win situation. Well, for the most part.
Yeah, so this is why they ask you to, stay at home or not come into contact with people when you have cold or any other infectious diseases, right? Yeah, and we have one more on vaccination. Yeah.
What if you could create your own delicious website, even if you don't know how? What if just saying your business is samosas made it all about samosa?
In 1796, the scientist Edward Jenner injected material from a cowpox virus into an 8-year-old boy, with a hunch that this would provide the protection needed to save people from deadly outbreaks of the related smallpox virus. It was a success. The 8-year-old was inoculated against the disease, and this became the first ever vaccine. But why did it work? To understand how vaccines function, we need to know how the immune system defends us against contagious diseases in the first place. When foreign microbes invade us, the immune system triggers a series of responses in an attempt to identify and remove them from our bodies. The signs that this immune response is working are the coughing, sneezing, inflammation, and fever we experience, which work to trap, deter, and rid the body of threatening things like bacteria. These innate immune responses also trigger our second line of defense, called adaptive immunity. Special cells called B cells and T cells are recruited to fight microbes and also record information about them, creating a memory of what the invaders look like and how best to fight them. This know-how becomes handy if the same pathogen invades the body again. But despite this smart response, there's still a risk involved. The body takes time to learn how to respond to pathogens and to build up these defenses. And even then, if a body is too weak or young to fight back when it's invaded, it might face very serious risk if the pathogen is particularly severe. But what if we could prepare the body's immune response, readying it before someone even got ill? This is where vaccines come in. Using the same principles that the body uses to defend itself, scientists use vaccines to trigger the body's adaptive immune system without exposing humans to the full-strength disease. This has resulted in many vaccines, which each work uniquely, separated into many different types. First, we have live attenuated vaccines. These are made of the pathogen itself, but a much weaker and tamer version. Next, we have inactive vaccines, in which the pathogens have been killed. The weakening and inactivation in both types of vaccine ensures that pathogens don't develop into the full-blown disease. But just like a disease, they trigger an immune response, teaching the body to recognize an attack by making a profile of pathogens in preparation. The downside is that live attenuated vaccines can be difficult to make, and because they're live and quite powerful, people with weaker immune systems can't have them, while inactive vaccines don't create long-lasting immunity. Another type, the subunit vaccine, is only made from one part of the pathogen, called an antigen, the ingredient that actually triggers the immune response. By even further isolating specific components of antigens, like proteins or polysaccharides, these vaccines can prompt specific responses. Scientists are now building a whole new range of vaccines called DNA vaccines. For this variety, they isolate the very genes that make the specific antigens the body needs to trigger its immune response to specific pathogens. When injected into the human body, those genes instruct cells in the body to make the antigens. This causes a stronger immune response, and prepares the body for any future threats. And because the vaccine only includes specific genetic material, it doesn't contain any other ingredients from the rest of the pathogen that could develop into the disease and harm the patient. If these vaccines become a success, we might be able to build more effective treatments for invasive pathogens in years to come. Just like Edward Jenner's amazing discovery spurred on modern medicine all those decades ago, continuing the development of vaccines might even allow us to treat diseases like HIV, malaria, or Ebola one day.
Right, so those were the different types of vaccines. And I can give you a small task to do if you all are interested. So right now we have two types of vaccines going around for COVID, right? One is called Covishield and one is called Covaxin, right? So you can look up and find out which type of vaccines they both are. Do they have the live version of COVID, or do they have what are they? Yeah, just if you are interested to know, you can look it up, right? If you just Google the name of the vaccine itself, it will tell you what it is, right? Okay. So yeah, this brings us to the end of the chapter. This is a relatively easy and just fact-based chapter. There are a lot of other videos that I had collected here, which I wanted to show you all, but yeah, I don't think it's possible right now. So what I'll do is I'll just share the PPT so you can watch it in your free time, right? There are a lot of good ones. What are types of diseases? How does a disease turn into a pandemic, right? You can see that. You can see cell versus virus to understand why viruses are difficult to manage and why is it difficult to make antivirals. What are parasites? Why is TB so dangerous, right? That. And how do viruses travel from animal to human? What are germs? I think germs one we covered. I'll just check. I think it's the same one. Yeah, I'll just check this. How smallpox was eradicated. Again, a very interesting one because this is the first and the only disease which we have managed to eradicate completely, right? So how it was completely eradicated, you can check that also. And why do you feel awful when you are sick? This is more on the lines of inflammation and what all happens when your immune system is triggered, right? This is a good one. Yeah, so I've just collected a few. Yeah, you can always look up on YouTube. There are a lot of videos on immune systems, vaccines, diseases, anything. So even if one of the diseases listed here, for example, if you're curious to find out what happens in influenza, what happens in chickenpox, what happens in malaria, right? If you just YouTube it or Google it, you will get complete life cycles, complete process, what exactly happens and all that. You can see all that to just understand what works, right? But for exam point of view or assessment point of view, this is sufficient. Whatever information is required, I've put it in the PPT itself. And if any video is required, I've added in it in the slides itself. So the videos at the end are just extra ones for, if you're interested, you can always check them out, right? Okay. And what I'll do is I will go through the questions, right? And I'll give you homework. So you have till page 180 only, right? So those questions which are till page 180, I'll just give them to you as homework. So you can do those and submit them. Fine. Okay. Yeah, let me know if you all have any doubts in any area, especially till part 180 in case anything you have any area you have any doubt.
No.
No. Okay.
No.
What about the others? Any doubt?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am. Okay. 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 No doubt. Then what I'll do is I'll give you questions. I'll send it on the WhatsApp group only. I'll have to see the questions, so I'll just give to you the questions. Then you can solve them, and I'll send the PPT also on the group right away, so you can use that PPT to study. Okay. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah. So yeah, once you solve the questions and if you have any doubts, you can ask on the group. I'll help you out with that. Okay. Okay. See you all then. Bye bye.
Bye, ma'am.
Bye,
Thank
ma'am.
you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Bye, ma'am. Thank you.
Bye.